The Watchtower article from which our comments is taken was entitled, "Cultivate the Spirit of a Lesser One." And we can see how this applies not only in marriage, but also here in Bethel, as well as in the congregation, and even in our dealings with others, worldly persons. But here's a question that each one of us needs to ask. Do I conduct myself as a lesser one? And how would you answer that question? Would you say, at times, sometimes, most times? Or would you say always? Well, if you say always, we want a second opinion. I think we all agree that there are at times when we do it, and then other times perhaps we might even have to balance out how we act by other factors, such as not having other people just trample over our lives. So it's not wrong for us at times to take into consideration what we would like to do. But sometimes this can be a very difficult thing to balance out. It reminds me a little of the year 1978 when I first went to Papua New Guinea to serve up there for 1 month. And a brother gave me the keys to an old Land Rover. And he said, as I took the keys, just remember, if you hit anyone, don't stop, go straight to the police station, because if you stop, people will probably kill you. And I remember thinking at the time, I've been driving for years. I mean, I'm not planning on hitting anyone. But then as I got into the Land Rover, I realized when I turned the steering wheel, it took about half a circle before there was a reaction. It was so sloppy and worn out. And then when I hit the brakes, you've probably had the experience of having to pump them 2 or 3 times before there was any reaction. Now all of a sudden, I started to take his advice a little bit more seriously. Well, doesn't that illustrate, when we come into the truth, how sometimes we overreact to things? Just imagine steering the vehicle and, you don't get any reaction at first, and all of a sudden there's an overreaction. And perhaps stopping when we should stop. Maybe we don't stop when we're speaking when we should. And it could be a little bit like that illustration that is in my mind of the experience I had. But as we're in the truth longer and longer, we should be able to, as it were, tighten up the steering a little and adjust the brakes. Not perfectly, of course, not in this system. None of us can be perfect. But at least there shouldn't be such an overreaction. And when it comes to this matter of dealing or conducting ourselves as a lesser one, that's a similar situation, isn't it? At first, perhaps we might overreact. But then as we get balance with spiritual maturity, then we find that we're not quite so extreme. So what will help us to, as it were, adjust the brakes and adjust the steering with regard to this subject? Well, remembering the danger of being self-centered is something that will help us. The Watchtower's had some very interesting articles on that over the years. Of course, a very bad example of being self-centered was Adam, because remember, as the inside volume says, he sold himself to do evil for the selfish pleasure of keeping continued company with his wife. And look at the bad results that have come from him being self-centered. A person who is self-centered is concerned solely with their own desires. And it's interesting as an organization how we really understand the big issue more so than any other group of persons on earth. Why do we say that? Well, you see, most people who claim to be Christian and who believe in Jesus Christ believe that the ultimate important issue is personal salvation. In other words, how much more self-centered can you get? It's all about me. Jesus came to save me. Well, it's true, we believe that we get the benefit from that, but as Jehovah's people, we see the bigger picture, don't we? That the sanctification of Jehovah's name, the vindication of his sovereignty, are much more important than our little world. And we're very happy to act in harmony with that. And our comments this morning help us to see how seeing that bigger picture, being Jehovah's people, representing him, helps us to conduct ourselves as lesser ones. Also, remembering some of the bad things that come because of being self-centered will help us in that adjustment. Let's have a look at Romans chapter 2, verse 1. The Watchtower highlighted 3 things that are very negative reactions because of being self-centered. The first one here in Romans 2:1, therefore you are inexcusable, O man, whoever you are, if you judge, for when you judge another, you condemn yourself, because you who judge practice the same things. So one of the results that can happen if a person is just self-centered is that they can have such a high opinion of their own view of things that they judge others. And you probably noticed that we all tend to do it. The thing that annoys us in other persons usually is the same thing that we do ourselves and that annoys others. And as it says here, if we judge others, then we condemn ourselves. Just think of the religious leaders in Jesus' day. They were so self-centered with regard to their own view of righteousness that they condemned Jesus for the humanitarian work he did on the Sabbath. Or what about Judas, who condemned the use of oil and anointing Jesus because he was worried about the money and supposedly helping the poor? So that's one negative thing that can come if we're too self-centered. What about a second one? Well, if we turn across to Proverbs 14 and verse 16, we see it described very accurately here. Proverbs 14 verse 16. The wise one is cautious and turns away from evil, but the stupid one is reckless and overconfident. So if we're self-centered and we don't view ourselves as a lesser one, we can be very overly confident. And being overconfident can lead to all sorts of problems. We've probably seen examples of this, some competitions where people sing or play the piano, or they supposedly have certain talents, and you see them come out and you're wondering how they're going to perform. And they come out with confidence. Have you noticed, if ever you've seen those shows, they come out as if they're God's gift to mankind. And then they start singing or playing an instrument and you're there. Don't they have any relatives at all? I mean, surely someone should tell them that. Anyway, it usually doesn't take long for the judges to tell them exactly what they're like. But you see, in life we could be like that. If we're self-centered, we can just view ourselves as being wonderful, and that can lead to all sorts of problems. Remember Peter at one stage there when Jesus said that they would be stumbled and leave him, and Peter said, oh no, although all the others are stumbled in connection with you, I will never be stumbled. Well, that was a statement of overconfidence, wasn't it? And then finally, one of the terrible things that can come because of being self-centered is a matter of pride. Usually we don't see ourselves as others see us. And the scriptures tell us that we have to be very careful about that. So if we're proud, perhaps our view of what we deserve to get here at Bethel or how we deserve to be treated could actually be distorted, couldn't it? So when we think about this, what's the key to success? How can we adjust the steering and the brakes, as it were? Well, by putting Jehovah first in our life. And that's what we all want to do, by realizing that there's a bigger issue than just what we personally like and want. And by taking that in consideration, then all of us will do our best in a balanced way to conduct ourselves as lesser ones.